Imagine this, you're on a family vacation, laughing with your kids, music playing, then suddenly, sirens. Guns drawn. You're on the ground, handcuffed, for no reason. But here's the twist, the father they just arrested? He's an FBI agent. And the cops have no idea who they just messed with. This story will blow your mind, because it's not just shocking, it's real. It was supposed to be a dream vacation. One of those picture-perfect moments you plan for months, filled with warm sun, sandy beaches, and long overdue family time. The Jackson family had been counting down the days. For them, this trip wasn't just about relaxation, it was a celebration. Their daughter Maya had just graduated high school with honors, and they were heading down the coast for a well-earned week of joy, laughter, and making memories. The morning had started like any other road trip. They'd packed the SUV with snacks, playlists, and beach gear. The kids were laughing in the back seat, playing their favorite songs and arguing over who got to control the music. Marcus, the father, drove with one hand on the wheel, the other occasionally reaching for his wife's hand. Cynthia, his wife, smiled and snapped photos for Instagram. For the first time in a while, life felt light and uncomplicated. Halfway through the drive, they pulled into a quiet gas station in a small coastal town, one of those sleepy places with palm trees, old diners, and not much else. It looked peaceful. Almost too peaceful. Marcus stepped out of the car to fuel up, whistling softly to himself. The sun was shining. The air smelled like saltwater and gasoline. Inside the car, the kids were laughing at a silly TikTok video. Everything seemed perfect. But that moment of calm didn't last. Out of nowhere, flashing red and blue lights lit up the entire parking lot. Tires screeched. 3 police cruisers came to a hard stop, boxing in their SUV from multiple directions. Then came the voices, sharp, aggressive, commanding. Hands where we can see them. Now. Marcus turned his head, instinctively raising his hands halfway before the officers even reached him. One had his weapon drawn. Another was already moving toward the vehicle, yelling at Cynthia to step out. She froze in confusion. The kid started crying, not understanding what was happening. "Sir, get on the ground. Now. What's going on?" Cynthia shouted, stepping out with her hands in the air. "Ma'am, stay back," one officer snapped, pointing a weapon in her direction. Marcus didn't argue. His training kicked in. He moved slowly, carefully lowering himself to the pavement, hands visible, voice steady. "I'm complying," he said firmly. "Please don't shoot." But the officers didn't ask any questions. They didn't ask for ID. They didn't even explain the reason for the stop. Within seconds, Marcus was handcuffed face down on the concrete. Cynthia, now panicking, was also pulled aside and cuffed, despite her frantic protests. "We didn't do anything. This is a mistake," she cried out. "We're on vacation." One officer barked into his radio. "Suspects detained. Vehicle matches the description of robbery suspects. Black male driver, black female passenger, 2 minors in the back." That was it. That was all it took. A vague description based solely on race, no plates matched, no stolen car, no actual investigation, just a black family traveling together in an SUV. Maya and her little brother watched from the back seat, trembling. Her phone was recording, hands shaking, tears falling. She didn't know what else to do. "They're arresting Mom and Dad," she whispered on the video. "We didn't do anything." On the ground, Marcus remained composed, despite the rage building inside him. Years of FBI training had taught him control. But it wasn't just about him anymore, it was about his family. The moment finally shifted when a younger officer approached one of the more aggressive cops and whispered something urgently. That's when the officer walked over to Marcus, now handcuffed and sitting upright against the curb. He held up Marcus's wallet, which had been taken from his back pocket. Inside was a badge. Marcus Jackson. Special Agent. FBI. The air went still. The energy changed instantly. The cop stammered, sir, we didn't realize. Marcus looked up at him. His eyes didn't blink. His voice was like steel. You didn't ask, he said. You assumed. The officer tried to explain, tried to justify the chaos with shaky excuses about a vehicle match, but it was too late. The damage had been done. His children had been traumatized. His wife had been humiliated. And he had been treated like a criminal, for being a black man in the wrong place at the wrong time. But there was one thing the officers didn't count on: this man knew the system better than they did. And now, he was going to make sure the world heard what happened. The situation escalated fast, too fast. Marcus was surrounded. Within seconds, the officers had their guns drawn and voices raised, each one barking out different, confusing commands. Get on the ground, now. Don't move. Stay right there. Stand up and turn around. Slowly. The chaos was deafening. The officers were shouting over one another, contradicting themselves, creating a whirlwind of fear and disorientation. Marcus froze in place, trying to process the orders, but nothing made sense. Complying with one meant disobeying the other. He raised his hands high in the air and kept his voice level. I'm complying. Please stop shouting. There are children in the car. But they weren't listening. Without hesitation, one of the officers tackled him to the ground, slamming his chest against the pavement. The cuffs snapped onto his wrists with force, and a knee dug into his back. Gravel cut into his skin. His breath caught in his throat, but even then, he stayed calm. He had faced criminals, trained in counterterrorism, but this? This was personal. From inside the car, Cynthia watched in horror. Her instinct was to run to her husband, but as soon as she stepped out, she was met with the same treatment. Keep your hands where we can see them, yelled an officer. I'm his wife. We haven't done anything. We're just on a family trip, she pleaded. But it didn't matter. She barely got 2 steps from the vehicle before she was roughly pulled aside and thrown up against the car. Her arms were twisted behind her back, and cold metal handcuffs snapped into place. Her cries were ignored, drowned out by the officers' adrenaline-fueled orders. Their daughter, Maya, watched through the window, frozen in disbelief. Her 10-year-old brother clung to her arm, sobbing. Why are they taking Mom and Dad? He asked, trembling. Maya, tears streaming down her face, didn't have an answer. The oldest officer stepped away from the scene and radioed in. We've got the suspects in custody. Black male driver, black female passenger. Vehicle matches the description from earlier today. 2 minors in the back. That was all it took. That one sentence was their justification. And the description they were acting on? A black family. In an SUV. That was it. No matching license plate. No reported stolen vehicle. No outstanding warrants. No suspicious behavior. No questions asked. Just a lazy excuse and a snap judgment. They weren't suspects. They weren't criminals. They were a family, black parents with 2 kids on vacation. But to those officers, that was enough to warrant a felony stop. Enough to escalate. Enough to traumatize. It wasn't law enforcement, it was racial profiling. Plain and simple. And as Marcus lay on the ground, watching his wife being manhandled and his children terrified, one thought kept repeating in his head. If I weren't trained, if I weren't who I am, would I even survive this? Still on the rough concrete, face pressed to the ground, Marcus Jackson could feel the weight of a knee digging into his back. Every muscle in his body was tense, not out of fear, but restraint. He had been in dangerous situations before. He had undergone tactical training, led federal raids, dealt with high-stakes undercover operations. But never had he felt this particular mix of humiliation and fury. His children were watching. His wife was being dragged away. And he was being treated like a violent criminal, because of a lazy assumption. In a calm, measured voice that only someone trained in crisis response could manage, he said, "Check my wallet." Left pocket. The officer pinning him down snapped back without hesitation, "Shut up. You'll speak when spoken to. We'll deal with you later." Marcus said nothing more. He knew escalating the situation verbally could result in something far worse. So he stayed still. Silent. Focused. Even with the pressure on his back, even with the sting of humiliation thick in the air, he kept breathing. Steady. Controlled. Then, a few minutes later, something changed. A younger officer, no older than 25, approached the lead cop with wide eyes and a shaken expression. He held up a leather wallet, slightly scuffed from the pavement. "Sir. I think we have a situation." The commanding officer turned and grabbed the wallet. His face twisted from confusion to something else, concern. Inside the wallet was a badge. Not just any badge. Special Agent Marcus D. Jackson. Federal Bureau of Investigation. The silence was immediate and heavy. It was as if the world froze. The commanding officer's face went pale. His jaw tightened. The other officers exchanged uncomfortable glances. The guns were lowered. The tone shifted, but the damage was already done. We didn't know," the officer stammered. "You didn't say you were." Marcus slowly sat up, the cuffs still on his wrists. He locked eyes with the man who had barked orders at him moments earlier. The very man who tackled him to the ground, screamed in his face, and never once asked a basic question. Marcus's voice was calm. Too calm. That kind of calm only comes when you're past anger, when you're staring directly into the face of injustice and choosing control over chaos. "You never asked." His voice was steady. "You just assumed." The officers stood frozen, unsure of what to do or say. The man they had cuffed, shoved, and accused without cause wasn't just some random civilian. He was one of the highest-trained law enforcement professionals in the country. Marcus continued, his eyes never leaving the officer's face. "You saw a black family in a nice car and turned it into a felony stop. You didn't run the plates. You didn't ask questions. You made your own story, and we became the suspects." One of the other officers awkwardly tried to remove the cuffs. "Let's just get these off you, sir." "Don't call me sir now." Marcus didn't flinch. "You only respect the badge, not the person wearing it." He stood up slowly, brushing the dust and gravel from his clothes. The moment was thick with discomfort, not just because they'd made a mistake, but because they realized how bad it truly was. They didn't arrest a criminal that day. They harassed a decorated federal agent. A husband. A father. And they did it all under the flimsy excuse of matching a description. As Marcus walked toward his wife and children, who were being uncuffed and comforted by a couple of now embarrassed officers, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't throw threats. But he was already planning his next move. Because this wasn't just about him. It was about every black family that's been profiled, humiliated, or endangered, without a badge to shield them. The story didn't stay quiet for long. Within hours of the incident, Cynthia uploaded the video from her phone to social media. It wasn't edited. No commentary. Just raw, painful footage, flashing lights, shouting officers, the sound of crying children, and a calm voice on the ground saying, "Check my wallet." The video went viral overnight. Millions watched in disbelief as the story unfolded. A decorated FBI agent wrongly cuffed in front of his family, treated like a suspect for simply being black in the wrong town. Hashtags like #DrivingWhileBlack and #Justice for Agent Jackson began trending. Influencers, journalists, activists, and even celebrities shared the footage with captions like, "If this is how they treat an FBI agent, imagine how they treat the rest of us." The public's outrage was immediate, and growing. In response, the local police department scrambled to contain the damage. The police chief held a hastily organized press conference. Standing stiffly behind a podium, he offered a carefully worded statement. "Our officers acted on what they believed was credible information. This was an unfortunate misunderstanding. We take allegations of racial profiling seriously." But no apology came. No officers were suspended. No acknowledgement of wrongdoing. The public wasn't having it. Within days, civil rights groups organized rallies, not just in that small coastal town but in cities across the country. Marchers carried signs with Marcus's badge number and photos of his family. Petitions gained over 500,000 signatures, demanding disciplinary action against the officers and mandatory anti-bias training across the department. Meanwhile, Marcus didn't retreat into silence. He leaned into his unique position, not just as a victim of profiling, but as someone who trains federal agents in the use of force and legal protocol. He took to TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, educating the public with clarity and authority. "I've been on both sides of the badge," Marcus said in a TikTok that racked up over 8 million views. "I train agents on how to assess threats. What those officers did wasn't about safety. It was about control. And bias." His words hit hard. Because they came not from anger, but truth. Even Maya, his daughter, spoke out during a live stream Q&A for her college-bound peers. "They treated us like criminals," she said, her voice shaking. "But my dad protects this country. That says everything." And that truth cut deep. Because the world now knew, this wasn't just a mistake. It was a pattern. And this time, they picked the wrong family. The story exploded online. Millions watched the video Cynthia had recorded on her phone. Public outrage grew. The local police chief held a press conference but refused to admit wrongdoing. But people weren't buying it. Civil rights groups rallied. Petitions gained over 500,000 signatures in days, demanding disciplinary action against the officers involved and mandatory anti-bias training for the entire department. Meanwhile, Marcus used his platform to educate. Not just as a victim, but as an insider in law enforcement. "I've been on both sides of the badge," he said in a viral TikTok. "I train agents on when to use force, how to assess threats. What those officers did wasn't about public safety. It was about power. And prejudice." His daughter, Maya, now preparing for college, added, "They treated us like criminals, but my dad protects this country. That says everything." This story isn't just a shocking twist about a man the police underestimated. It's a mirror, held up to a system that too often treats black families like suspects first, citizens second. The Jackson family's terrifying experience turned into a national conversation. And Marcus? He's still with the FBI. But now, he's working on a special task force focused on racial bias and police reform. "They tried to scare us," he says, "but we're not afraid anymore. Because sometimes, the badge you carry isn't just a job. It's a shield against injustice. And a weapon to fight for truth." Like, comment and subscribe. Right arrow if you believe justice should never be based on color. Share this story. Right arrow what would you have done in Marcus's situation? Let us know in the comments.